Thank you for listening to this episode.
And follow the podcast on social media by finding at prestigiouspod. And if you'd like to be coached on how to live a more prestigious life, you can reach out to me, Chris Bean, at Chris Bean Official, or by emailing the podcast directly at prestigiousinitiative@gmail.com.
Lastly, sign up for our newsletter either through social media or on our website.
This is the Prestigious Initiative. Welcome. I'm Chris Bean. I'm really excited about today's guest, Kevin Armstrong. Kevin has been a driving force in the world of business leadership and coaching for decades. He's a TEDx speaker, the author of Miracle Manager, and someone who has helped countless business owners and leaders unlock their full potential. Kevin, thank you for joining me here today.
Oh, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
So, Kevin, can you start by just tell me a little bit about who you are and what brought you with us today?
I work with small businesses, entrepreneurial businesses, 5 to 500 employees, usually entrepreneurial owned, so that they can make decisions without having to go through a bunch of channels. And I find that works best in terms of getting results.
Okay. So one of the things that you're known for is that TEDx talk, which is entitled "Stop Sending Ducks to Eagle School." Can you tell us a little bit more about that concept and why it's so important for business leaders to know?
Well, I was a salesperson. I became top salesperson with a company, and they made the mistake of making me vice president, overseeing 38 branches, throughout the country in Bermuda, and I wasn't good. I was lucky I had a CEO who took me under his wing and understood my drawbacks. But although I was a top performer, I was a terrible manager, and so that sort of started me on a journey. The VP of Finance at the time said, "Do you know what a good manager is?" And I said, I started talking for a while, which means I didn't know, because that's usually what happens when people start talking for a while. When you ask them for a definition, it should be in one sentence. So I kind of understood the confusion, but I also understood he didn't know either. And so that started me down a path. In 2005, I was out of the corporate circle, and I was running a business with business owners. And Wayne Gretzky had been named head coach of the Phoenix Coyotes. And for some reason, I just thought, I don't think it's going to work. And it didn't. And then I started thinking about this and defining what really good managers do and what they are. And I hired a researcher to study hockey, basketball, and baseball, to sort of see how do the top performers do when they go into coaching. And the results were exactly supported why Gretzky didn't do well coaching and why I didn't do well managing as a salesperson.
And so really it seems like, even though like Wayne Gretzky is really great at the role that he was in before he became the manager.
Right.
Or really anybody else, right? You're super good at that one role, but as soon as you move away from that role, there's a new toolkit that you should be given, or new tools that you should have access to that you don't really know. And really, it seems like the hard part is even managers themselves don't really know what they're supposed to be doing or what it looks like to be a good manager. So we're all just trying to figure it out for ourselves.
Right. And you can understand. I mean, if you had the choice of taking a golf lesson, a golf lesson with Rory McIlroy or Gina Johnson, you would definitely choose Rory, because he's the best golfer. But you might have just made a huge mistake, because Gina was the person who has coached 12 women to professional careers. And she's not even a good golfer, so I mean, she's not a great golfer. She knows the game, but and she knows how to coach. But so managing and coaching are synonymous in that it's getting things done efficiently and effectively through others. The coach in sports in music, in drama, the director, they can't step onto the stage or the ice or the field. They have to prepare their team and get that team to function on the ice without them stepping onto it. But unfortunately in business, we get away with it. And then, so we take our top performers and they really end up just doing a lot of the work as opposed to delegating and doing what a good coach or manager does.
And they're doing what they have experience of doing, which is the work, because they are the top performers. Yeah.
Exactly. So they fall into it. I think another trap is, and I know I was guilty of it, I was top salesperson, so you had to sell the way I sold. You had to do everything the way I did it, in terms of trying to teach people, and you don't. There's different ways of doing things. If you look at a golf swing, you have many different types of golf swings, especially with men, and they get away with it. And some of them are really good, and they don't have what you would be taught as a functional, proper golf swing.
And I guess
So
really those high performers, oftentimes they're in that role. They think, oh yeah, I'm the best, I can do this. And they're trying to make carbon copies of themselves, which is not something really that can be done, because that brings out it takes out the personal element for that other person.
yeah, like when you look at a great manager or coach, have you had in your lifetime, if I asked you to visualize a great manager or coach, who would you visualize?
The boss that I have now.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Right. So, and usually that person is empathetic. So they can read people. They know how what they're saying and what they're doing is impacting the person they're working with. They're highly organized, which is why I could never be a great manager. Right? You're very organized. I don't know if you ever had a bad manager that tells you to do something by Friday and have it done by Friday, and then they never follow up. So you kind of go, you know what? This is a waste of time. Next time they ask me to do something, I'm just going to wait and see if they follow up or not, right? And so you have to be extremely organized. You have to be able to connect with people. The difference between empathy and being able to connect is empathy is being able to read people, but the ability to connect is really important. Like when someone comes up to you and says, "Hey, I screwed up." In my old days, I would have gone, "Yeah, you sure did," But as a parent, or as a manager, or as a good coach, what you'd say is, "Hey, you should have seen me the first time I tried this. But you think you're bad," and then tell them a story about how you screwed up. Right? That connects you with people. Standing there and going, "Yeah," or just being quiet when they say they screwed up, and not letting them know that you're going to screw up, you're going to fail, and you're going to be embarrassed sometimes as you try and go through this process. And sharing times with you even screwed up worse really allows you to connect. And then you have to have the tough conversations. You have to be able to sit down. This is a new one for me. It just came to me about a year ago. Somebody asked me, "Do you know the difference between nice and kind? Being nice and being kind? What do you think the difference is?"
Well, let's see. So I would say nice would be, sometimes you could be a pushover, but kind is you do it with intent and purpose behind what you're doing.
Right. Definitely I think that explains what you have to be nice and kind. But nice is just is if you're an alcoholic, you're a good friend of mine, and you're drinking a lot and you're embarrassing yourself a lot, and it really seems like you have a problem. The nice thing to do is ignore it, because we're friends, right? The kind thing to do is have a conversation with you about what I'm observing, and asking if you need help and things. But kind requires courage. Being nice doesn't require courage, because what might happen if I do that with you, if I'm kind and I have that conversation?
Well, there's tension in the relationship then.
Exactly. You might never talk to me again, because you're in denial, right? So the great manager or coach is a very kind person. They can have those conversations one-on-one and get results out of people by being able to connect, by being empathetic, by being organized, and by having those kind, tough conversations. And none of that has anything to do with how you can hit a hockey puck or how you can, throw a baseball.
Right. And really those are the key things that kind of separate the difference between leaders and managers, which I know is something that you talk about. What are some other things that would kind of separate a leader from what a manager could or should be?
Well, if you talk about a leader is able to look to the future and do the right thing. I'm really concerned. I'm more passionate about the leadership team. I like to speak at schools and speak to young people because I feel sorry for them. We take all this stuff around leadership and we throw it at the wall. Like when you say to a group of people, raise your hands if you think you're a good leader, or even if you are a leader, right? Very few people raise their hands, and I know a lot of people that are great leaders, and would never consider themselves leader. A good friend of mine, coached rugby and hockey for his kids, and he's a good community leader. He runs a good business. But he's very quiet. He's but his ability to stick with what he thinks is right, look to the future, know it, and have that ability to predict and anticipate, and then stick with what he thinks is right. It's really important, and so if we just have that, look to the future and do what you feel is right, no matter what anybody else thinks. That's what changes the world, and everybody's got that ability. Not everybody has the ability to be a manager or a coach.
And really, having that ability isn't incredibly necessary as long as there's somebody on the team that the boss can pull in to be in that manager role, somebody that already has those skills, which is, I'm sure, why it's so important for the leader of the business to know the difference between those two, so they can pick their people and put them in the right roles. Because as we all know, that is one of the most challenging parts of running the business.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And that's the thing is sometimes just a quiet person on the team, who can be a good manager or coach. I always look at it like, if you look at a team, there's a captain. The captain's usually a really good player and a really good role model for the rest of the team. Where the coach is a person who again has those qualities of being organized, having the tough conversations, able to connect, empathy, and knows how to get results out of people.
So,
And so that's
if we're the owner of this business and we have, let's say our deck is stacked, we have all the right people, but we don't know what role to put them in. As the owner of the business, what type of things through the day to day can I see that I can pull out? Oh, that's leadership quality. Oh, that's a manager's quality. We need to put them into a management role.
Mm-hmm. So your top performer definitely is usually a leader, right? In order to be a great performer, you got passionate about what you do. You're able to anticipate and predict, and you do all the right things. So when you see this top performer, that's easy to see. The manager coach is not so easy to see, and that's a great question you have. You can do behavior. We do behavior assessments to find out, do they get people? Are they empathetic? There's assessments you can do on people to find that out. But I'm not saying that if a person's top performer and they apply for a management position, you shouldn't consider them. But you also have to understand that if they don't have those qualities of a great manager or coach, you're setting them up for failure. And when they take that position and fail, they might leave. They usually always do leave, right? So you got to be really careful because you just took your top performer, made Marcus Buckingham says it great in terms of Marcus Buckingham really gets this stuff. He wrote First Break All the Rules. And the thing is that you really have to take that person and cast them properly. He used the word what I love, casting people right for their roles. But if you go back to leadership, I mean, Steve Jobs, Elon Musk these days, great leaders. I mean, just their ability to look to the future and to be intense about what they want and so focused. But I don't know if I'd want either one of those people managing, especially Steve Jobs. I mean, he's got a history. That you can do enough research to find out, he just didn't get people. Like he did not connect with people. Walt Disney, all these people, if you do studies on them, they didn't have those qualities of a great manager. If you'd taken those people and made them managers, their companies would have failed.
Which is
So
why they remain in that role of the top performer, and those people in particular kind of strategically either found themselves or developed roles for themselves where they could be the top performer while also being the head of the company, the head of the business.
right, that's right. And I'm with EOS Worldwide. I mean, this is a company where Gino Wickman, who wrote the book Traction, I started with him and about 14 others 13 years ago. And the reason I fell in love with Gino was because he called it the visionary and the integrator. The visionary being the leader, the integrator being a great manager. And you got probably an 80% chance that the founder of a company, the person who started that company, the person who's running that company is a terrible manager. Terrible, right? But they're running both roles. They're both the visionary and the integrator, or the leader and the manager. And so what we go is we go in and let them recognize that, make them understand the skill sets of a great manager, and get somebody in place to run that company with a leadership team where actually the integrator is the one making the final call. The business owner lets go of that responsibility and lets that integrator run the company while the integrator, while the visionary or the leader goes off and does the leadership things like Steve Jobs, looking at the future, figuring out what the new technologies are or what the new direction is for the company. And that's when you start to see incredible things happen. Like I have clients, they go, "Whoa, you charge a lot of money." I go, "Hey, I'll do it for free. Let's just value your company. We'll choose a valuator, and this goes out to all your listeners. If they have a company, I'll do it for free. We'll just choose a valuator, and then we'll evaluate the business. And 5 years from now, you give me 20% over that valuation." So the 3 companies that I work with that sold this year, if we had that deal, would have had to pay me about I think 24 million. So I'd gladly work for you under that condition, because once you start to get that owner into their right, lane, and we get a manager managing the business, like magic starts to happen. It's phenomenal to watch.
Right. Well, and I can imagine that is a tough challenge for that business owner to be able to step away and work on just the visionary part and not on the managing part, because then they're letting go. They're setting the day to day, the managing of the people in somebody else's hands, which means that they have to separate themselves. And I'm sure that can be a challenge, but I'm also positive because I've seen things like this before, that can set the difference for the business, because that business owner has so many things on their plate, and without a manager in that key role of managing the people, they're also trying to manage, and they can't do the things that they have to do to have that vision for what the business can or should be, the direction. They're not driving, they're trying to steer the boat and do all the dishes and clean the deck, and they're doing too many things all at one time. And so once you put that manager in position, then they can be in charge of steering the ship.
Right, exactly. And the big challenge is to get that visionary, that founder, to let go.
Mm-hmm.
Like lots of coaching and lots of redirection, and having the faith in that integrator to take care of things they traditionally thought that only they could take care of.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you also emphasize that purpose and not position is the key to the performance. And that's kind of what we were just talking about. But I wonder, can you explain what you mean by purpose drives leadership effectiveness?
Yeah, and there's a word I think we make way too much out of, right? You definitely need to have a purpose. I love to disrupt the way people think. I liked that one as a high school teacher. I liked it when I was in sales. I liked it when I owned my businesses. I liked it when I'm doing what I'm doing now, right? To disrupt the way people think. I know that that's my purpose, and I love doing it. But I remember a buddy of mine and I were going to Vegas. We were going to drive up to Utah from there to do some mountain biking. So we had our mountain bikes in boxes, and we were taking the rent-a-car bus from the airport to the rent-a-car. I don't know if you've done that in Vegas, but it's a long bus ride. You think you're going to Utah itself, but we got on the bus, and there's this guy, and he jumps out of the bus, and he comes up and he goes, "I'll get those bags." And I said, "Well, they're pretty heavy." He goes, "I got them." So he threw the bags on. He said, "What's your name?" I said, "Kevin." "What's your name?" "Jim, my buddy." He said, "Oh, where are you from?" We told him where he's from. Well, there was 20 some plus people on that bus. He got on after loading all the bags. Everybody was sitting down. he's looking in the rear view while he drives the rent-a-car, and he's calling us out. He goes, Kev, you're from Canada. He said, they still have the snowmobiles out. This is like July or June or something, right? Have they put the snowmobiles away yet? And everybody starts laughing. My buddy's 6'8". So he goes, Jim, did you play basketball? And he goes, nope. He says, ballet? And so everybody starts laughing. And he knew every person's name on that bus and did the same thing from it was the shortest bus ride ever from Vegas Airport to the rent-a-car depot. And he got out, and every single person, I'm sure, gave him at least $3 to $5. I gave him $10. And so I'm calculating, this guy's making $400 or $500 a day cash, but that's not it. He knew what his purpose was. I mean, you can either be a bus driver, or you can be the bus driver. And the difference that will make is if you know your purpose, if you understand, and the purpose, whether you're washing dishes or whether you're singing on stage as an entertainer, to understand what is your purpose in life. And it doesn't have to be extravagant. You just got to be passionate about it.
And I wholeheartedly agree in that. Do you have any tips that somebody could use to help to find what their purpose could or should be?
Yeah, go do something. And that's the other thing. Everybody sits around going, "Oh, I got to discover my purpose." You're not going to discover it unless you just start doing things. And you're going to find things that just come naturally to you. If I go to another conference where a speaker's on the stage saying you have to work on your weaknesses, I'm going to get up and leave, because that's just not the case. What you need to do is work on your strengths, and your strengths are usually centered around your talent, and your talent will help you find your purpose. The problem is you won't find it unless you go out and do things. If you had good parents, they put you in front of a musical instrument. They had you play a few sports. They didn't try and live their dreams through you, like Tiger Woods' dad. Totally screwed up the person. It's allowing people to just get away from the screen and go do something. And you'll find it. I remember buying my first. I worked in a union job after high school, and then I went to university, and the union couldn't hire me. They hired me the first summer. The second summer, they couldn't hire me. So I went and bought a pickup truck, and I started cleaning out people's yards. And in the last year, before I started teaching high school, that last summer, I made more money than I did in my first year teaching. I had 2 dump trucks and about 5 students working for me. And so you start to go, hey, I really love this idea of working for yourself and working with people that work for themselves and people that run companies. This whole thing was just, I enjoyed it. They enjoyed me. And that's how you find out. So when we talk about purpose, I think it's just go do something.
And I think to piggyback on that just a little bit, you have to be willing to fail and accept failure, because if you are trying something new, if you're trying something that is a little bit scary, you very likely and probably will fail, and not to let that failure deter you from trying it again. Just because you failed once doesn't mean you can't try again. And just because you failed at this doesn't mean that you are a failure. Failure is a part of the process. You have to go through those failures in order to move outside of your comfort zone to see what's on the other side of that wall. And without that, without getting up and going doing thing and accepting that failure, you're stuck. You don't move anywhere. You're done.
I can't believe that you just said that, because I posted something yesterday on that, right? It's just what I've discovered over the years is great salespeople and great business owners usually have not a lot of formal education. They're either high school dropouts or they dropped out of college. Steve Jobs, first year of college, he dropped out. Bill Gates, same. Like, you just go through these entrepreneurs who didn't have a lot of, because I think what happens is formal education really ingrains in us that failure is to be avoided at all costs. And if you're in sales or you run a business, you understand you got to thrive on failure. You got to understand that you got to try things and you're going to fail at them, and that brings you one step closer. if you're heading in the right direction. So failure is just exactly what you just said.
Yeah.
You couldn't have said it better.
And I think that failure and that association or that connection or understanding of what failure is like you said, is what separates the normal people from the high performers. Is that
Yeah,
accepting of failure? Yeah.
accepting a failure, going out and trying something. There's so many cliche, statements, right? Like, um, Wayne Gretzky, I guess, has got the best. You're going to miss 100% of the shots you don't take.
Mhm.
And so, yeah, just go and do something. Like, then don't try and think you have to have this great, big, huge kind of drop from the heaven purpose, that comes out. It could be I'm going to be the best food server ever. I'm going to be the food server, not a food server, but the food server. And people like that really tend to do well in life.
And I think you could probably overlay that type of mentality on whatever your job is. And even if that isn't necessarily your purpose, you could make
Mhm.
that into your purpose until you find that other thing that can be your next purpose.
Yeah. And that's what a great manager or coach does is they watch the team and they watch the talents and they and what turns each person on and getting that right person in the right seat, right? Where they actually get it, where they have a natural talent, where they want to be there because it's their purpose and they have the capacity. They have the physical, emotional, or intellectual capacity, whatever's needed for that seat. And if you look at any great coach, their ego is way down here. It's all about how do we get the right people in the right lane doing the right thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we were just talking about kind of skirting around accountability, but I know a lot of business owners struggle with that accountability in their teams. What is your approach to creating a culture of accountability where those politics can't survive?
Well, I just work with leadership teams, and it's a little different because it's all open and honest. There's no parking lot conversations. It all starts with the leadership team. Jim Collins, did a lot of work 15 years ago to try and he sent his researchers out and said, find me companies that really perform well, but it's not about the people at the top. It's not about the leadership. So Jim Collins, he sent these people out. They came back and they said it is all about leadership. So I just work with leadership teams, and I tell them you're one leadership team away from extinction. So you've got to be the ones that are accountable. It all starts here. If you're not accountable, nobody else in the organization is going to be accountable. And it all starts with you. Stephen Covey Jr. wrote the book Trust, The Speed of Trust. And it's not a great book, but there's some good stuff in it. One of the things was, do you trust yourself? So if you got up this morning and said you're gonna do a workout, did you do the workout? You're gonna swim half mile, you can just swim the half mile. Because if you don't follow through on the things you say you commit yourself, how are you going to expect others to commit? And how are you going to trust them to commit when you can't even trust yourself? So it's about taking small steps and setting things for yourself. And are you accountable to yourself in terms of what you say you're going to do? And that's a huge thing because that's where it starts, is with you. And then we go to the team, the leadership team, the team at the top. Are they doing what they're? And so we have these things where every 90 days they have to have certain things. I sit down with them every 90 days. They grade each other on whether they accomplish what they set out to accomplish. Because everybody in the company is looking at the leadership team, and they're making sure that they walk their talk. And so I think accountability, it starts with you trusting yourself because you follow through on what you say you're going to do. Then the team follows through on what they say they're going to do, the leadership team, which will just flow through the company where all the teams will be executing, as expected.
So, okay, I've heard a concept before that talked about if I was a coach and if I'm working on the individual, that is, let's say, owning the business, if I work on them, don't worry about the business at all. If I work on them improving themselves, then the business by default will improve because they have improved themselves. And that seemingly is what you're talking about. If you take accountability for your own actions, if you own
Mhm.
your own world, what you're doing, you have accountability for yourself, then that will
Yeah.
spill over to your team. That'll spill over to the environment that you set for your work environment, and everybody else. All the ducks, like we talked about ducks a little bit ago, but all the ducks will kind of fall in line. You work on yourself, and the business will improve by default.
Yeah, you have to have a strong definition of integrity, right? Integrity is consistency between what you think, say, and do, and only measured on what you do.
Mm.
So if you're saying things, but your actions aren't consistent with what you're saying, and what you're saying is what you believe, apparently, and then your actions. I mean, when I was the vice president of sales and marketing, we'd have these board meetings, and at the lunchtime, the board would have wine with their lunch, and I would say to them, I wasn't very popular. I just, what's interesting is we're drinking alcohol at lunchtime. Yeah, if we went back to the office, back to the plant, we'd be prepared to fire people who are drinking alcohol on the job. Again, is there something wrong with this? And we're going back into meetings this afternoon after people have had a couple of glasses of wine. And so they just didn't get it. They think, well, nobody knows. Well, I know. And and there's people that could walk in here from the company to deliver a letter or something. They're going to see it and they're going to talk. And so, are you walking your talk? That's accountability.
And that probably is one of the hardest things, especially for those. I mean, for everybody on in the business, but really for those high level people, because they have more often than not set a persona for themselves, and they're trying, as they're in that role of the business owner, as a CEO or whatever it is, but every time they go there, they have to be on. They're in that role, and with that, then there's a certain sort of difficult ability to be able to walk your walk, not only when you're in that role, but when you're away from that role as well, and to have that connected type personality when you are the same in the business and outside of the business.
Yeah, I forgot who wrote the book. Everything I ever needed to learn, I learned in kindergarten. And he had 10 rules. And number 6 was, don't be so concerned your kids aren't listening to you. Be more concerned they're watching you.
Mm.
And so, you got to do what you say you're going to do, or have a really good reason that everybody understands as to why it wasn't achieved.
Yes.
And then when you start to get that mindset into a company, it is just incredible what starts to happen.
Now, in your experience, what are some biggest mistakes that leaders make when they're trying to manage their team? And then maybe what could they do to avoid some of those pitfalls?
Biggest mistakes that a manager or coach makes when they're managing or coaching their team?
Yeah.
Biggest mistakes, I would say number 1, let's go right up the top, is communication. We got a real challenge today. It's actually going to be my next TED Talk. I try and get my companies to create an unwritten policy that anything that's negative or critical must be communicated face to face, and if not possible, then over the phone. So either face to face on Zoom or in person or on the phone, but no writing. And we are really in a tough spot right now because it is so easy to text and email, and so many channels through Slack and all these different ways of communicating, that we can sit down and write a real nasty email and punch the send button and duck under our table while the explosion takes place at the other side, right? And there's no way to interpret tone. If in our organization, if somebody sends an email, or a customer complains or a client's got a question and they're not agreeing, if somebody responds to that by email, we will fire them. It is, you need to pick up the phone and have a conversation. I think you've seen it. I'm sure you've seen it, right? Where you see this email going back and forth, and then you pick up the phone and you solve it in like 26 seconds. But it's just going back, and it drives me freaking crazy. So one of my clients calls it the one bounce back rule. So somebody asks you what the rule is. It's, let's say, as a customer, and you write, this is the procedure, and they write back going, well, I don't understand, or I don't agree. You pick up the phone, or you go see them. And so I think great managers and coaches know how to have the conversations. They know how to have those kind, needed, critical conversations. And if you read Crucial Conversations, is a great book. There's ways of strategizing, of learning how to have those conversations, but avoiding them is not it. If you fire somebody and they're upset and crying, then you should be fired as a manager or coach, because you haven't had the conversations. 90% of the time, and I've seen it. I'm speaking from experience. 90% of the time, when you sit down with a person and say, this is critical that you're able to do this in your job, and you're not doing it. And if you don't do it, it's critical, meaning you won't be here 3 months from now or 6 months from now. I need to see improvement. And then you write them a letter. You've already written a letter before the conversation, so it's real clear in your mind. And you give them that letter after the conversation. You do that a couple of times. 90% of the time, they're either going to come up to standard or they're going to leave. You're not going to have to fire them. And when you do fire them, it's going to be a handshake, and they're going to be smiling because they were waiting for severance, or they knew it was coming. There's no surprises because you've had these conversations. But unfortunately, the norm is you just avoid those conversations until the behavior just ticks you off so bad that you walk in and fire the person. The person is shocked because they had no idea what they were doing was that bad. And the reason they don't is because you didn't communicate it. So these are the things. I think that's the number one thing is get up, quit hiding behind your keyboard, have the conversations, follow up in writing so they clearly understand how bad it is and or good it is. That's another thing we're not doing, is having the good conversations about how much. I can write you a letter and say stuff. When I sit down eyeball to eyeball and say, Chris, I really like what you do here. Like last week when you stayed with that client till 7:00 and they walked out of here, I just wish I had 1,000 of you. So those are the things that I think if I had to pick one thing, that would be it.
Well, and it's interesting because that communication can go both ways, right? So, and most of the time it only goes from the employee side, the worker side, to the boss. Hey, I don't get enough recognition for this, or hey, I didn't know, but it's because the boss, the leader, wasn't opening that two-way street. They weren't walking down and saying, hey, I need you to fix this or tweak this. They think that they'll figure it out. I don't want it. Or maybe they don't like the confrontation or whatever it is, but you have to, as the manager, as the leader of the business, you have to be able to have that conversation, whether it's a good conversation or a negative conversation, because otherwise they're going to keep doing whatever that thing is that you don't like. Jordan Peterson talks about, if your kids are doing something that you don't want them to do or annoys you, then you'll start to be annoyed by your kids. And so you tell them or teach them what to do and what not to do so that you don't have to be annoyed by your kids, or in this case, by the employees that are working for you. Because every time you see Jim and Jim doesn't do that thing that you want him to do, well, it's because you didn't tell him to do that thing or how you wanted him to do it. He doesn't know otherwise. So if you don't tell them that, there's no way that they're going to know that.
Exactly. 90% of performance problems are lack of communicated expectations. Mm-hmm. That's what it is. It just, what are your expectations, and is that person meeting them or not? And whenever I'm called in and there's a problem between a manager and an employee, I go, does that person know what's expected of them? And the manager go, yeah. And I'll say, show me. Don't tell me. Show me. I want to see the piece of paper where they understand these are critical expectations of yours. And I want to see a letter that says you've had a conversation, reviewing that conversation, pointing out that they're not making that critical expectation. And never, I can almost say never, is that in writing. They'll say, oh, I had that conversation. Well, if there's nothing in writing, then you didn't. So we know we don't know whether you had the conversation or not, because if it's not in writing, it doesn't exist. So where's the follow-up?
Right.
And so when you start to get into the expectations, then that person knows. And it's also about, drawing lines, having tough conversations, and then following through, with that person.
And like you said earlier, without that follow through, then you're just that bad manager. I don't have to do this work because they're not going to ever check in on it because they never do, and I'm going to wait to do it until they ask about it because otherwise I don't need to do it. Yeah.
Yeah, if you're a manager in a management position or a coaching position, there's no difference. And you're listening to this podcast right now. My question to you is, what's the conversation that you need to have that you haven't had? And I guarantee you, something's going through your mind right now. Right? There's some person that you're putting up with it. You're putting your hands together and praying that it's going to change, and it's not going to change until you have the conversation with a follow-up letter. It just works.
Absolutely. Now,
Yeah.
Kevin, I love how you talk about getting your business to work for you instead of you working for your business. What are some tangible steps that a business owner could do to achieve that type of freedom?
I think buy the book Traction and go to the website for EOS Worldwide. Traction by Gino Wickman, and go to EOS Worldwide. To me, all the tools are there to start to understand. There's another book called Rocket Fuel by Mark Winters. Just to understand that relationship and what your shortcomings are as a business owner, and why you're frustrated, why it feels like you're taking one step forward and two steps back. And I don't care if you just started a year ago and you got 2 employees, or you've been at it for 20 years and you got 300 employees. There's another level that you want to go to. And what's stopping you is you. You know, if you always think what you always thought, you'll always get what you always got, kind of thinking, right? And so what are you going to do differently? And the only way to do that, we call it hitting a ceiling. The only way to break that ceiling is to, and I look at it kind of like, you hit a ceiling when you've got 10 employees, you hit a ceiling when you got 40 employees, you hit a ceiling when you got 100 employees, hit another ceiling when you got 200 employees, because you have to build management infrastructure. And it's just all that much more letting go and everybody getting into their own lane. That makes sense?
It does. Yeah. And so that ceiling, that reminds me of the 21 irrefutable laws of leadership, where it's called the law of the lid, where you can only go as high as where your leader's at. But if you are the leader and you're stuck at that ceiling, you can't go anymore. So you have to, like you said, you have to put that infrastructure, and you have to be able to be willing to hand over the keys, sort of say, to your employees, or put somebody in that role so that you can go and have visualize what the next step in the process is. You can steer the boat while somebody else is cleaning the decks.
Yeah, and the overall theme of this whole conversation is, don't assume that when you're about to put another person in charge as a manager or coach, that it is your top warehouse man or your top engineer or your top salesperson, right? That is not, it might be, but there's a good chance it's not. And we need to recognize our top people at their performance and give them actually more money, more recognition than the actual manager. Right. And let's go find that person who's good at coordinating, who's got the empathy, the organizational skills, is organized, and knows how to have the tough conversations, and has a real passion for watching people grow. Low ego, no narcissism. You know, that person is what we're looking for in terms of the manager. And then your company will thrive. But if you make the mistake of going, oh, I'm going to get a manager, I'm going to take my top person, there's an 80% chance you're heading for more chaos.
Yeah. Now, can you share your Mana Coach concept and how it helps business owners become more effective managers?
I'm not sure what you're asking.
So you have this concept of Mana Coach, right?
Yep.
Okay.
So the Mana Coach is a great manager coach. Go ahead.
Well, and what with that manager coach type of mindset, how can business owners try to embody that mindset to be more effective managers, or to find those effective managers?
Read First, Break All the Rules, because what we do in business is absolutely wrong. When you look at, you know who Wayne Gretzky is. Do you know who Glenn Sather is? No, he was Wayne Gretzky's coach for Edmonton when they won all those Stanley Cups. And the reason we don't know who he is he sat on the bench, made a fraction of what Wayne did, got a fraction of the media attention. He was humbly sitting on that bench, right? And so when you go through and you say, who was Michael Jordan's coach? Well, a lot of people know that. But I mean, when you go through and look at top athletes, top performers, top musicians, your favorite movie, who was the director? Sometimes you know, sometimes you don't. I mean, you know Spielberg, but a lot of times you don't know who the director was. You know who all the top stars were, right? So in those kind of performance activities like sports and music and entertainment, that coach, that manager, that mana coach is not the highest paid and gets the most recognition. They pay and give the most recognition to your top performers. There are some countries like Japan that haven't forgotten that, but in North America, we forgot. We forgot. I mean, the amount of money we pay for CEOs and CFOs, scorekeepers, like a CFO is a scorekeeper, right? The CEO is your sort of head leader in the company, but they're the coach on the bench. And so your top performer should be getting the most money and the most recognition. And Marcus Buckingham does a great job of really making that clear for people that we screwed up in business. We give all the top money and recognition to the scorekeeper, the accountants. We give to the referees, the lawyers, right? We're crazy. And then these managers and what they're paying, the front line, a CEO in North America can make 400 times what the frontline person's making, 400 to 1,000 times what the frontline person's making. You'd never see that in Japan. So we got. So I don't know how. There are companies that are doing it, but you've got to give the recognition to your top performers.
Well, I think so. There's an ego aspect to that, right? The manager doesn't want their employee, the person that's under them, to get paid more than them. Because I'm managing them. I should be getting paid more than them. And you're right, that's certainly a ingrained mindset, a concept even that is overlaid over all the businesses that I have ever known or been a part of, because that's just how it works. But really, without that key performer, that high performer that's in that role that they're in, the business would be way worse off. Somebody else would have to step in the role, and they would likely fail at what that high performer is doing, because they have been there. They know the ins and outs. They know how it works. They're in their key position. They found their purpose, and that manager is kind of guiding and directing them. And to be fair, that manager probably isn't spending a whole bunch of time with the high performer because they don't need to. But that high performer is doing the work day in and day out. They are making the business money. That manager is just there to kind of help and guide them. Yeah, the manager has to get paid, but the manager doesn't have to get paid more than the high performer. The high performer certainly should get paid more because they are the high performer. They are the key, one of the key players of the business.
Your top warehouse man or woman, like they're making all the orders sing. They get there on time. They're always filled out correctly. All the paperwork's correct. That person should be getting a lot of money and recognition, more than their manager. And so we screwed it up in business. We got it all screwed up, and so you can turn it around. One of the things when I work with a leadership team, they say let's go to Vegas or let's go to Hawaii for our annual retreat. I go, how does that look to the rest of the company? You guys, we're trying to teach them that being on the leadership team is not a status thing. This has nothing to do with status. This has to do with function. And so let's just send our top salespeople to Hawaii. Let's get our top warehouse man and our top accountant and a few of our top salespeople and send them to Las Vegas. This isn't for us to do. And that type of thinking is hard for a company to get their head around.
Well, and that's the ego. You got to stamp out the ego, because with that ego, that it just that whole system that works correctly or should work correctly isn't in place because of everybody's ego.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But when you see a company get their heads around that, and they start to become objective driven instead of status driven, it is amazing what starts to happen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, Kevin, lastly, for those listening, what is one piece of advice that you'd give business owners or leaders that want to make an immediate impact on their organization?
Start having the conversation. Learn to have the proper conversations and start having them. I would say probably, and I got this from Michael Olasso, who was a coach of mine and a great inspiration. But he teaches really well the whole idea of really, really having these conversations about how well somebody does something. He calls it TSP, truthful, specific, positive. Sitting down and going, geez, Chris, I really appreciate that every time we do this, you're on time. You're very professional in terms of how you set this up. I love the fact that, when you sent me that email on Friday, it had all the questions that you were going to ask today. Gave me a lot to think about. You just came across as so professional. And having those types of conversations, as opposed to always looking at catch people doing things right, as opposed to, watching them do wrong. Focus on the people that really do things well. Because unfortunately, we can get focused too much on the people that need help and aren't doing things well. And we're ignoring some of the great things that are happening. And if you start tracking your good shots in golf, I guarantee you 80 to 85% of them are good. You just don't believe that until you start tracking it. It's only 15% of them are bad. And, so there's 85% of good things happening in your company. Are you calling it out? Are you recognizing it? Are you seeing now people on your teams and really showing appreciation for the fact that they really do their job well?
Well, Kevin, thank you. Thank you so much for sharing your insights today. It's been a really eye-opening conversation. And to our listeners, who I'm sure they will take a lot away from this. And speaking of the listeners, if they wanted to contact you or get in contact with you to learn more about you or your business, where could they go to do that?
KevinGArmstrong.com works. That's probably the best.
All right.
The miraclemanager.com, the miracle manager with THE in front of it. TheMiracleManager.com or KevinGArmstrong.com. Love to hear from them.
Wonderful. And I'll be sure to leave those links in the show notes. Thank you again, Kevin, to our listeners. If you found today's episode valuable, be sure to share it with somebody who could find benefit from these leadership insights. Until next time, stay focused, stay driven, and keep working to become the best version of yourself.